Welcome everyone to the captive audience. Sorry, we were starting a few minutes late here, but yes, I am in the process of getting my car repaired. Having a bout of inflation. You know, it's one of those things that you can think about, and then when it really hits you upside the head, you're pissed off. But it's happening everywhere, and of course, we've got the Democrats telling us that it is our imagination. The economy is super awesome and inflation is under control and going down, which is a great way of telling you that it's all your imagination. So you must be misinformed. But if you can't buy as much stuff as you could 4 years ago, then you don't have any reason to feel better about this. I'll give you an example from today. Today, we've actually got a very interesting situation where the price of Oregon's gas has gone down 4.3 cents. But I think everybody knows that it went up dramatically in a rather short period of time. And from a year ago, it's up 30 cents. So do you feel 4.3 cents better? Or do you feel, what would that be? 25.7 cents worse. Put me in the latter category because that's actually a super easy one, isn't it? And we've got so many different problems that could be solved if we had good leadership, but we don't have it. It's pretty clear. It couldn't be more clear in some ways because right now we've got a country that is just completely in the ditch. It's in the ditch. And you know who's noticing? Everyone. Isn't that interesting? Everyone's noticing. And I'm glad for that because when you tell everybody that they're imagining something and that they're stupid, they deserve people who are doing that deserve a course correction, a political slap up the side of the head, and they're going to get it. But let me get to that shortly. There's a lot of interesting news here in Oregon. I'm just going to explore the news. Why? Because I had no time to prepare for tonight's show. I saw some things, I watched some things here and there, but no time to actually say, "Hey, let's cover these topics." So I'm just going to go through and see what we do find because there are some interesting topics that have hit in the last couple of days in particular, and I want to bring those to you. So, for starters, Oregon has just been ranked as among the most dangerous states, according to a new report. Shootings and homicides are declining in Portland, Oregon's largest city, but that doesn't change how the state ranks nationwide. By the way, they're on a decline in in Oregon's largest city, Portland, from just like inflation, a dramatic multi-100% increase, and then it goes down slightly, and they're like, "See, it's going great." But this new report shows that based on violent crime and property crime, we're one of the 10 most dangerous. In the first quarter of 2022, Portland police said there were 483 shootings and 34 homicides. At the same time in 2023, there were 346 shootings and 29 homicides. See, it went down, but not by very much and way above what it was years ago. In 2024, there are 285 shootings, 25 homicides. From January 1st through May 11th, there have been 304 shootings and 27 homicides. But all 7 were due to gunfire. Ted Wheeler, as a result, has declared a gun violence emergency because guns jumped out of somebody's dresser drawer or glove compartment and started shooting people. It's horrible that guns are so capable of doing that and that criminals and people with criminal intent have nothing to do with it. That's just amazing. These are people who will never solve anything because they actually aren't going after the cause, which is criminals who, by the way, if you take away guns, they'll still get them because they don't follow laws. I know. I can't believe I still have to explain this to people. But now they're taking credit for what they say is a dip in homicides. They say a lot of the major shooters are in jail right now. Really? For how long? When will Tina Kotek release them the way Kate Brown did? And of course, how many of these people were undercharged based on the crimes that they were alleged to have committed by the Schmidt Show, Mike Schmidt, district attorney? By the way, if you live in Portland or you know anybody who lives in Portland, it is very important to get a ballot in for Nathan Vasquez, who is running against Mike Schmidt to replace him as district attorney. And there's a very good chance I think he's going to win. But let's not even make it close. Let's get every vote in. Nathan Vasquez. And Nathan works in the same office. He works for, technically, Mike Schmidt. But of course, he has a different opinion on how things should be run than Mike Schmidt. And that's what is going to change here if we can get Nathan in. There's only a few, but it's 1 week from tonight that you got to be turning your ballot in and making sure that we put the kibosh on the Schmidt Show. It's super important that happens. And so if you know anybody in Portland who says, I don't know if my vote makes any difference, you better vote in that. Because I don't want to hear from anybody that they didn't vote in this election and that they complain like there's just so much crime and nobody does anything about it. It's like, well, then you do something about it with your ballot and tell other people to do the same. It's super duper important. And this is in Portland, where they elected Renee Gonzalez to replace John Hardesty as a city councilor. And there's going to be elections this fall, which are going to be very important to pay attention to. There's some county commission races right now that we got to watch as well. And you do have to look for who the favored or endorsed candidates are. Let me tell you a little bit something about Multnomah County here in particular, if you happen to be there. There are several different tax bonds on the ballot: the zoo tax, the gas tax, and the school bond, where they ask for more and more money. Supposedly, a gas tax is going to help you with the roads. If you've seen the roads and almost lost your entire vehicle in a pothole, then you know that is BS. The zoo tax bond, I think, given the fact that things are super expensive right now, and that's supposed to be provided for by Metro, where we already pay a tax, an additional zoo tax bond sounds like a bad idea to me. We really need to make sure that we focus on safe communities, and law enforcement, law and order, and make sure that the money that we have goes to that. And then, of course, the school bond, where they're hemorrhaging students, losing students ever since 2020. People don't want to go back to it. The schools have failed. They have such low ratings every year, leading the nation and being the worst in almost every category. They've removed graduation requirements. They spend all their time on woke garbage, and now they want more money. To do more of that? No, thank you. Let's send a message. There are some public safety levies that are on the ballot around the state. And I think you should look carefully at those. Are they increases? Are they renewals? Are they actually going to public safety? Are they going to something else? Is it a way of guaranteeing that money goes to public safety because we're not getting it from the general fund, which is actually where it should generally come from. And so take a look at those. There's a whole bunch of stuff all around the state. I don't know where you can get an example. This is the Taxpayer Voter Guide from the Taxpayer Association of Oregon. And I recommend everybody take a look at this. They've got some recommendations on the contested races statewide and in Congress. Treasurer Brian Boquist, Secretary of State, they recommend Dennis Linthicum. The Attorney General's race, Will Lathrop, that's super important. There are some judicial races. And Judge District 3, Position 11, Martin Habacost. District 6, Position 5, Jameson Hayes. Position 20, or District 20, Position 6, Charlie Bailey. Definitely got to vote for Charlie Bailey. He has managed to make sure that law and order doesn't go off the rails in Washington County, which is really, really important, because you don't want to see a backpedaling there like we've seen in Portland. The Taxpayer Association recommends in Congressional District 6, Mike Erickson, and in Congressional District 4, Monique Despain. And then there's just a zillion things on the other side. And I really don't have an easy way to share this with you, but it's an important voter guide because Jason Williams, the Taxpayer Association, goes to a lot of trouble to make sure that he knows what's out there and tells people about it so that when they get their ballots and their voter guides, they can really sift through that pretty quickly. Anyway, back to Oregon being the most dangerous, one of the most dangerous states. This article seems to be celebrating that it's improved slightly, but really the fentanyl epidemic and the related homelessness that goes with it and the crime that flows from it is worse than ever. And even though some of the policies are shifting, they really haven't changed much on the ground. And so, and a lot of this, the homicides and so on, are people just acting out with guns while they're doing meth and fentanyl, living the outdoor life on the streets. And this is the thing. We have to look at what money is being spent on, if it's being spent successfully and effectively. Many groups that receive money from the government say that they're, for instance, combating homelessness or addiction, don't have in their objective to get people off of the streets and get them into recovery and off these drugs. They simply give them more of what they want to have so they can stay on the street and continue to do it. And there's even people, I have seen videos of homeless people that are drug addicted that are complaining that all they're doing is getting more help to sustain their drug habit and not the help that they say they would rather have, which is to get off those drugs. So I think it's a very good idea to scrutinize what the money's going to. I know many of the people running as Republicans on the ticket are emphasizing transparency and accountability. And that's because there's an ocean of money and we are not seeing results like we're promised. And everybody gets that. Everybody who expects something to work. Here's another Portland story. Yesterday, there was a news story that came out that said Joe Biden's wife, Jill Biden, had actually made a quick visit to Portland last Thursday to Lake Oswego for a fundraiser, because apparently there are people actually still brain dead that haven't gotten the memo that the president is effectively a human Roomba. That's why they had to send her, I guess, because if they send him, actually they might figure it out. But there are people still giving money to this guy because they think they're going to reelect him. And I'm going to talk in a minute about how that's not looking like that. But there were protesters who, not knowing where she was going for sure, but they staked out the freeway bridges on I-84 and I-205 to intercept her motorcade. And these are the pro-Hamas protesters. And this is something that's, I think, threatening to engulf the Democrat Party. I think their convention in Chicago is going to be seized upon by pro-Hamas, pro-terrorism supporters that don't think Israel should be allowed to defend itself and eliminate the threat of Hamas. But you know what? I'm not even sure that Joe Biden is on board with that anymore, because he's worried, because he saw that in Michigan, in the primary that took place, 100,000 people in Michigan voted uncommitted as a protest vote when they had literally no other choice on the ballot besides Joe Biden in the Democrat primary. And the turnout of uncommitted votes protesting against Joe Biden, which this is Dearborn, Michigan, heavily Muslim area, unhappy with the president's policy about Gaza and supporting Israel at all. The turnout for this is so large that these uncommitted voters managed to earn 2 delegate votes at the Democratic convention this summer. I don't know how they choose who they are, because they don't have an uncommitted party and an uncommitted, but I guess there's going to be some uncommitted delegates going to this Democrat convention. And Ted Wheeler said, he kind of minimized the whole thing. Says it's going to be loud, it's going to be aggressive, but by the time it's all done, I think we'll all be grateful. Really, I think we could say that about his mayorship at this point. It is. And Jill Biden went to Phoenix after she came to Portland, and she decided she was offering a message that apparently Joe Biden can no longer pronounce about offering free college for students. And some of the members in the audience walked out on her. So not a good reception. Joe Biden himself was protested in California. So that convention, the Democrat convention, is going to be fascinating, because I think a lot of folks who are old enough to remember or recall the events of 1968, the Vietnam War, and what was going on with the Democrat primary. It was after Bobby Kennedy had been assassinated, and it wasn't clear who was going to emerge as the Democrat nominee. As I recall, it was Hubert Humphrey, kind of a compromise. But they had riots that were very violent outside of the Democrat convention, which the Chicago police put down with typical Mayor Daley brutality. And that was, that reminds me of that song, The Night Chicago Died. I can't even remember who sang it, but this is going to be the night Chicago died, or was overwhelmed by pro-terrorist supporters, a la 2024. So stay tuned for that. Here's another story. Did I post, by the way, the gasoline? Let me post that, because I think everybody should take a look at that. This is so typical of how the Democrats celebrate improvement, when it's in fact a tiny improvement over a massive increase. And so therefore, if you still feel like you're paying too much for a gallon of gas, you are. So let's see. So we covered that. Lars Larson's got something that he's put out there. Tuesday next week, you pretend to vote for judges. The Oregon Constitution guarantees your right to vote in judges, but it's really a conspiracy. And he's right. Here's how it works. Judges make hugely important decisions: divorces, business disputes, whether you get locked up for life or walk free, whether you get to keep your Second Amendment or not, whether or not people who are homeless have a right to live anywhere they want, including in your front yard, and big stuff. But the Democrats really don't want to leave this choice to you. So nearly every judge doesn't finish their term. They quit in the middle of his or her term, or their term, just to cover every one of the genders there. And then the government, which have been Democrats for 40 years, appoint their replacement. Then in a couple of years, the replacement runs for re-election runs for election for the first time, but nearly all the time, no one runs against them. If you want to be a lawyer that might actually come before that judge, then no one wants to risk the well-being of their legal career, the way they make their money to survive and live, by running against a judge who might actually oversee a case if they don't happen to win. So as Lars puts it, if you run against a judge and lose, which most challengers do, your law career is toast. The Daily Dead Frisch Rapper, the Oregonian, points out that 7 of the 12 Multnomah County judges didn't even bother to put a statement in the voters' pamphlet. Why would they? They're running unopposed with a complete certainty of winning. And the quid pro quo for the judges when they do quit is they quit in the middle of their terms. So that's the deal. I'll appoint you, you run as an incumbent, and then when you're done, you quit in the middle of your term, and we keep the gravy train going. There's no real choice. This needs to change. And it's a dream of the Democrat Party to have, a control that's not subject to any recourse by the voters. Not real recourse. By the way, the judges get a little I next to their name, incumbent, which is like a clue to tell people, like, here's who you're supposed to vote for. Do you know of any other office where that's done anywhere? No. So it's a scam, and Oregon's thick in the grips of it. And if we don't end up having a complete elimination of Measure 114 for being unconstitutional, it'll be because at the appellate court or state Supreme Court level, we're looking at judges who are complete ideological automatons put there by Democrat governors for decades. And each set of Democrat governors has appointed further and further people to the left who, frankly, have more in common with Mike Schmidt than they do with any reasonable law and order person that you can imagine. So this is what we're facing as a state. Now, let me give you some positive news here. And I think this is, so in Oregon Congressional District 4, one of the candidates, Monique Despain, has just come out with a TV ad. You can go watch it if you like. I will post it there. And you can also read about it. The Oregon Catalyst put a story in here about it. And I think this shows that this is actually a very serious campaign with a lot of potential. And I think the only one running TV ads, and there's only 2 candidates in the primary. But this means that maybe we actually have a race in the 4th district where corrupt incumbent Val Hoyle, we've covered her many times here. She's written up by national liberal publications for what she's been doing with LaMotta, and how she's gotten under federal investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice for her activities in getting an illegal grant issued to LaMotta. So, and she was already in deep doo-doo for many things that she had been involved with, including discrimination that she ignored while at the Bureau of Labor and Industry that was taking place against the people investigating discrimination at the Bureau of Labor and Industry working for her. She did nothing about it. The Bureau of Labor and Industry got sued. And then, sometime 6 or 8 months after she had left to go take up her position in Congress, the Bureau of Labor and Industry lost and cost us $3 million taxpayer money. Didn't cost her any money, but hopefully it'll cost Val Hoyle her position in Congress. And let me tell you, this is really fascinating. Oregon Capitol Chronicle came out with an article that says there's a new list that ranks the most bipartisan members of Congress and the least. So when you look at this, it's all relative. It's the ranking is done by it's called the Lugar Center, which is named after former U.S. Senator Chuck Lugar, who was kind of seen as a moderate Republican. Dick Lugar from Indiana, and it really, the intent of it was to evaluate the degree of bipartisanship being exercised by members of Congress. Well, here's what you need to know about one of the members of Congress from here in Oregon, Val Hoyle. That's right. For somebody who is in a district that was fairly close in 2022 and even in 2020, Val Hoyle seems to have found a way to get her to not act like she is in a district that could be lost. If when all is said and done, she ranks in I think it's 333 Let me see if I can find her here in this list. And let me post this for you too. So I'm going to post the article right here. But, out of 435 members, which encompasses both parties, Val Hoyle is 333. She's actually less bipartisan than Suzanne Bonamici, which is at 114, Earl Blumenauer at 178, and Andrea Salinas at 222. And certainly Bonamici and Blumenauer have a good reason to not be bipartisan, because they're in districts that are like you can win by 40 points, right? Now, Val Hoyle that's how she's cast her lot. We've seen her cast consistent far left votes, way out of sync with her district. And the only way that this actually gets corrected is that we, people in the 4th district, decide that in fact they do want somebody who can work in a bipartisan fashion, which is literally 80% of the Congress is more bipartisan than Val Hoyle. Hard to do. So anyway, just wanted you to know about that. That's some interesting news, and finally, maybe some of that's getting exposed here, and it's well deserved. In all honesty, somebody needed to shine a light on this, and thank you for the Lugar Center for doing that. Now, shifting gears here to national politics. A couple of stories really stood out to me here. One is that a former Obama advisor is actually warning that Joe Biden is way out of touch with what's going on in the economy. Last week, he did an interview on CNN where he just seemed to poo-poo the whole idea that there is inflation. And granted, I've encountered some people that just actually don't know or understand anything about the economy. They must be just not paying the prices at the store that the rest of us are paying, or they are independently wealthy or something. But literally, the people who can least afford inflation are getting hit by it the hardest. And I think it's the economy is right there at the top of the list right now, by the way, in addition to, the many other issues that we have. Economy is now surged to the top, even though it's a close second is immigration / the border, which we know that's really the border, because immigration hasn't changed at all. We're getting plenty of it. It's all legal, it's seemingly. And so swing state voters, we're seeing a problem with the economy. Inflation is a part of it. And a lot of folks are being impacted by it. And Joe Biden doesn't seem to understand this. So I think it's important to point out that when somebody, and this is on CNN, I'm trying to remember his name. He's Van Jones. Van Jones is like, I think they don't understand that economic prospects for young people in particular they're miserable. I've heard this independently corroborated by polling information that young people ages 18 to 35 don't really feel like they're going to be able to afford a home anytime soon. So the dream of home ownership, of building families, of, kind of becoming that bedrock cornerstone of the community, that's maybe out of reach for them. And then there's a whole bunch of other things that are very expensive. Of course, cars, food, and yeah, let's not fool ourselves. Medical care, all these things that the Democrats did to say, well, we'll give you free medical care. Well, what they didn't do anything about is the significant cost in inflation of medical care. Think of how hard it is to find a doctor nowadays. Well, what does that do? Fewer doctors, the same or more people need medical care. Inflation, it's a market. You can't decide that something isn't a market because you just don't like the fact that it's a market. Supply and demand exists. And if you just say, well, then what we're going to do is we're going to cap the amount that someone's allowed to charge under those circumstances in a marketplace, then you just have shortages and you run out. And you know who knows that? Anybody who understands economics. So the people running our country don't understand how to fix any of this. And I think it was David Axelrod who also said something about this when he was being interviewed the other day. He says, I just don't understand how Biden can say something so out of touch. And that, but I do. The guy doesn't know what he's doing. He only knows what people tell him. He doesn't live in a real world. It's a bubble. And it's been a long time since Democrats have been the party of the working man or woman. So they're the party of left-wing tech billionaires, coastal elites, hedge fund managers, all Hollywood, multi-millionaires and billionaires. That's what they are. And those people can say things that make sense for them, but don't make sense for people who actually have to get out there and make ends meet in the real economy on a daily basis. They don't care about the people who can't afford the energy that they need to heat their homes, fuel their cars, and live a productive life. They don't care. And this is starting to seep through. Now, let me tell you, here's another piece of very useful information. You know how everybody's trying to say that Republicans have a Donald Trump problem? Actually, it's becoming more apparent. And Tom Cotton, who's a Republican senator from the state of Arkansas, especially based on the way Biden is dealing with the economy, with foreign policy, and with the border, it would seem that Democrats are starting to realize that they're the ones that have a Joe Biden problem. This left-wing outlet, and I don't know which one it was. Let me see if I can find it here because, these outlets are starting to say the quiet part out loud, not only about Joe Biden, but the prospects for the entire economy. And it's the New Republic, which is a famous mainstream Democrat publication that says the Democrats have a Joe Biden problem. There are legitimate reasons to gripe with some of the arguments why Biden is so unpopular. Inflation may cool, but with the election only 6 months away, and then of course they go on to say, it's looking like he is in deep, deep doo-doo. And here's one statistic for you from a scientific poll. I forget which college it is, but who do you trust more to handle the economy? Biden, 25%, Donald Trump, 68%. And when the top issue is the economy, then maybe you're actually in a world of hurt. And so I really liked this this YouTube interview from Fox News of Tom Cotton, because he lays it out. And I think that Democrats that don't admit that they have a Joe Biden problem, they're living in a world that they deserve to live in which Joe Biden actually is going to tank their entire party. All these seats that they think they're going to hold on to, they might not hold on to any of them. And yet every day, another outrage comes from the left, from the Biden administration. There was a warning issued just the other day that in federal agencies, if you're working in a federal agency, you can be dismissed. Feds warn it's private employers, because the EEOC, the Equal Opportunity Commission, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the feds warn employers can be punished for failing to use the preferred transgender pronoun and the preferred restrooms desired by someone who's transgendered. This is like yet another example, and yet this is just coming out of the Biden administration, the many people that he's appointed all these different roles. It's like the Transgender Day of Visibility that Joe Biden signed the executive order for, and then 3 days later, and that was Easter, by the way, and then 3 days later, he's like, I didn't do that. And then they show him a document with his signature on it. So I don't even think it's possible to save this situation. The entire government's out of control. It's out there trying to re-engineer our entire society by executive order, by edict. And the guy who's signing the executive orders either is incapable, has memory problems that he can't remember, or he actually doesn't know what he's signing when he's signing it, which is even worse. And this is a great Daily Caller article here that you should take a look at. It looks like what is it called? WPATH. Let me see what this is. It's the WPATH tapes, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, and the gender medical industry. Somehow someone got a hold of this, and there's this video of a Mayo Clinic trained Canadian plastic surgeon who discovered phalloplasty procedures during 2 closed to the public presentations in September of 2022. And the Daily Caller News Foundation acquired this, and it shows that it was through a public records request, apparently. So we had a right to see this, even though it was a closed door presentation. And when asked at the conference how young patients may be, this doctor, Dr. Alex Lungwani, said definitely age of majority. I don't know what that means, but he said that genital change surgery is, quote, an adventure, unquote, for young individuals during a presentation that was hosted by this association. And he described that it involves a series of surgeries that include removing the genital organs of a female, lengthening the urethra, harvesting tissue from the forearm to surgically create an artificial penile shaft. Sorry, I know this is kind of a gory detail. And then placing penile and testicular implants into the newly created shaft. It's among a number of controversial procedures and treatments euphemistically referred to by activists and some doctors as gender-affirming care. This is an adventure, apparently. And they talk. He admits there's tons of delays because of complications. There definitely will be complications. I don't hear them talking about that openly when they are saying everybody should be entitled to this and should get this if they are told by some authority figure that that's a very good idea. And, if you want to like see what could go wrong, if you want to see more information about this and kind of get a more detailed, I did post this twice, sorry, of what they're talking about and what you want to warn younger people about who might not think this is a big deal at all. There's a YouTube video which shows a presentation of what was given at this conference. Crazy. It's just insane. Now, I did see some other very good news I want to share with you. In the presidential race, it looks like the Democrats are actually starting to panic a little bit. And they are starting to panic for one very good reason. They actually know right now that there are 3 states in which Joe Biden is behind in the current polling. And in those 3 states, and one of them is Arizona, the other is Nevada. I can't remember the third one. Might be Georgia. Anyway, more diverse populations. than you see, say, up in the Great Lakes states where the race is polling more closely. So Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania are all close within the margin of error, keeping in mind that President Trump never led in any of the polls for those states in 2020, and it was, of course, very close. Now he's ahead, but in most of those three states, but within the margin of error. So you have to kind of assume that maybe he might be better than the numbers indicate. But the numbers in Nevada and Arizona are eye-catching. And so Arizona, it shows President Trump with a 6-point lead outside of the margin of error. It's pretty significant. And in Nevada, which has not been won by a Republican since George W. Bush defeated John Kerry there in 2004, he has a 13-point lead. A 13-point lead. I can tell you that a 13-point lead is catastrophic if you think you actually have a chance of winning a state like Nevada, especially when you look back to 2020 when it was very close, but it never showed President Trump with any lead. And in this case, it actually shows him with a 13-point lead. They may have to actually throw in the towel on that one in the coming months. We'll see what happens. I don't really know. You know, it's a lifetime away, November, and all the things that could happen between now and then. But it shows you where they're desperately trying to throw President Trump in jail for all kinds of simulated non-crimes and prosecutions that lack all integrity. Yeah, I see that, Lori. Thank you, and thank you for the update. And please do pray for David. You know, we miss him. He's one of the founders of this show and a great American, a great Republican, and so we're praying for him, and we really want him back, to be honest. So everybody, you know, and thank you for sharing that, Lori. Please pray for David. Please pray for Karen and his family as they fight this fight. Let me see. There was one other story I wanted to share with you here before we wrap up, and it is something that when you think about how there's a lot of issues out there, a lot of concerns about many different things, we have to be smart about paying attention to Democrats trying to pretend that everything is fine, and sometimes even trying to pretend to be tough on issues that they were famously not tough on. In fact, they were the opposite. And one example of this is on the border. Val Hoyle, again, in February 2nd, said, we need this movement through the border. We need these people to come in. That was in El Paso, Texas. She said it in a news conference. Now she has actually sent a letter to to President Biden, begging him to go and use his power of executive orders, which he's always had, because that's how he got it. That's how he reversed all of President Trump's executive orders and unleashed the border that we have now. But I really think that this is a great example of how they're going to try to run away from the mess they've created and what they're responsible for. And I can give you this specific example of Val Hoyle because there were 15 other Democrats who happened to be facing what they call a tough campaign cycle. They are swing seats or vulnerable seats. And they sent this letter to Biden saying, asking him to take executive action to better address security at the southern border, interdict illicit fentanyl, and allow for orderly legal immigration, which code for that is they want to keep doing what they're doing, just legalize it. That's what they want to do. Millions and millions and millions and millions of people just flowing straight into the country from everywhere in the world. Orderly, I don't know. They don't really define that. because right now they don't really know who the people are that are coming into the country. And even when they find out they're terrorists or repeat criminal child sex traffickers, they let them in anyway. And they don't seem to be able to get around to finding them and deporting them once they discover that it's a bad thing. So, and there's a method to this madness. And I'm just going to post this here because this is actually a pretty good summary of this. It's a press release, and it's an article that outlines this 15 Democrats and what they call on Biden to do. And this isn't just some conservative publication that's putting this out there. It's actually CBS News. And on top of that, in the case of Val Hoyle, which Monique Despain describes that as a desperate reaction to Val's obvious political reelection emergency she's facing in the 4th District, along with 14 other Democrats across the country. Now, but Val Hoyle also voted against a bill which would have required that the millions and millions and millions of illegal migrants that have come into the country, when census takers go and conduct a census, that they note and ask the question if somebody is here legally or not, and if they're a non-citizen or not. And then it also, in turn, requires that those people be noted in the census, in these census, and that they be excluded from reapportionment and redistricting. Well, if you vote against that, you want to keep the current system, then what does that mean you want to see happen with the millions of illegal migrants in the country? Well, you want them, this movement through the border, to be counted. And it'll be counted disproportionately in the states that describe themselves as sanctuary states, destinations for people who come here illegally to receive all kinds of government benefits and to be not subject to removal, even if they commit crimes. So what happens when the next census occurs? They just get counted as if they are you and I, citizens. And then once they get counted, those states will get more representatives in Congress as a result. It's a way to skew the election system in the country by rewarding bringing millions of illegal migrants into the country and then letting them stay no matter what, and then having them counted. That is, I think, really a complete. If you think we've had problems with our election system, that might be the biggest one of all. And they know they're doing it, and that's why they're voting against this. So I recommend everybody take a look at this, because HR 7109 is what they're doing in Congress to expose this, and Democrats are trying to pretend like it's just fine here. And in fact, there was an interview with a hidden identity of a Border Patrol person who said that the Border Patrol, as a Border Patrol agent, said, we don't control the border, the cartel controls the border. And they just go around nitpicking and reacting to the cartel. So actually, foreign drug and human trafficking organizations actually control the United States border, not the United States. By the way, another person who's trying to pretend to be the opposite of what he really is, Mike Schmidt, the Multnomah County District Attorney. He's the Soros-financed guy, openly, and Soros also funded Measure 110. Mike Schmidt pretended that he's against Measure 110 now, or wanted it reformed, was supportive of the reform, a month after saying he was did not have an opinion on it and was technically against it. And now he's trying to run as a tough on crime district attorney. You heard it, tough on crime. I think the only crime that he's tough on is anybody who wears a MAGA hat and walks in Portland, gets assaulted, and then fights back. That person's going to get prosecuted. You can count on it. So we have to call that out, and we have to let people know what's happening. Don't let them pull the wool over people's eyes. This is what, in an election year, we get to decide once again who runs the country. And we've got to step up. We've got to step up. So I hope that was a good show. I flew solo. I covered a whole bunch of stuff. It was whatever I saw, mostly on OregonWatchdog.com. I recommend everybody take a look at that because they highlight some of the most important stories happening in this state and national stories that affect our state and our cities and what happens with us here. So anyway, thanks again for watching here tonight. Thanks for following us so regularly and religiously. And please share the show with everyone you can. And again, pray for David Darnell and his family in his fight to get back and recover. We want him back. We really do. Have a good night, everyone. And Sonny and Don will be back tomorrow night for the next episode of The Captive Audience.